which have primarily composites used for their structure. Furthermore, there's also other areas of aerospace which have innovated. You look at the aerodynamic design of the component safety, which uses a very brute force approach to aerodynamics. And comparing this to modern day aerodynamics, we have, for example, modern day gliders, which are really the pinnacle of efficient aerodynamic design. However, there's one part of aerospace which has not innovated significantly. We see here an image from 1907 of an aircraft, and we see or we recognize control surfaces similar to what we have nowadays. And this is where our DEC comes in. We have designed the pulse probe, which is a novel approach to control surfaces, and it does this by using plasma. But how do we use plasma? Well, to answer that question, we'll break it down into several parts. We'll start off by explaining what is plasma, and then we'll move to the effect that it has towards the flow around it, the advantages it brings, the opportunities it brings, and what markets it brings. We take one of these example markets, which the pulse from sabotage, and then from this we'll talk more about the design decisions we made for this code. So, starting at the very basic level, what is plasma? We have, let's say, a solid. If you add more energy, you get a liquid. If you add more energy, you get a gas. These three states of matter we see around us every day. However, if you add more energy to a gas, what we do is we create plasma, which is effectively a highly ionized gas. But you might say that the first three we see around us every day. Well, what about plasma? We do see this around us very naturally. We see this in the form of lightning, for example, or in the form of aurora borealis. However, it can also be man-made with things such as neon signs. But how do neon signs work? Well, let's look at a simplified electrical circuit. So we have, for example, a high voltage alternating current generator, and in that circuit as well, we have two electrodes with a dielectric barrier between. And when we close the switch, we create plasma. So let's modify the circuit slightly. Let's have it in this form, which is a more compact form, however the principle remains the same. And now we close the switch and we create plasma like this. Now, this is great in theory, and we see plasma on the slides, but we don't see plasma in real life. Well, to do that, let's demonstrate. So we can turn on this outlet. So here we have two copper actuators with a dielectric barrier between. And what happens when we turn on the circuit, or when we close the switch? For the people in the back, there's it as well. You see, we create this plasma, and we hear this high-pitched noise. But you can't see much. But what happens when we turn on the lights? So you should start to be able to see this purplish, bluish glow, which is plasma. And that's great. So we've created plasma, but how does it affect, or how can we use this plasma? Well, let's look at what it does to the flow around it. So when we look at the flow control around the dielectric barrier, we see that the actuators will basically ionize gas locally around it. And through the electric field that it creates, it will accelerate that along a certain direction. And then through viscous effects, what happens is that more flow follows it. So we see it like this. We close the switch, plasma is created, and flow is directed along the actuator. Again, that's great in theory, but let's see a more practical application of this. We have this video here where we see a plasma actuator being mounted on the suction side of an airfoil. And we see that initially, this airfoil is in slow configuration. And we can see that by the separation level on the aft side. And when we turn on the plasma actuator, you recognize it by the purple glow, the laminarization of the flow effectively delays the stall. And that brings me to the advantage of it. As mentioned, stall delay is a very notable advantage. However, there's other ones. It offers a very flush design, which reduces noise produced and reduces drag. Furthermore, it's also lightweight. It has a very fast response time, due to being electrically actuated rather than mechanically. It's easily maintainable and it's cheap. It does come with certain drawbacks, however. There's small control authority, low airspeed applications, limited durability, and a high dependence on the environment around it. That's great. We've now covered quite a bit of plasma. But how can we use plasma? What sort of doors and opportunities does it bring? Well, to answer that question, I'd like to invite Ona to answer.
Hello. Yes. So we wanted to find out in what market markets we could actually exploit these advantages that plasma brings us. So we did a market analysis, and from this we found that markets such as aerial photography, wildlife monitoring, military applications, and noise pollution mapping are very good for this. Also, as a team, we wanted a mission that would bring a commercial product. So this mostly left us with military applications and noise pollution mapping. Eventually, we didn't choose for military applications due to ethical reasons, and we went on the noise pollution mapping. So, noise pollution, much like normal pollution that's bad for your lungs, noise pollution is quite bad for your ears. So, government agencies like municipalities and other bodies are very interested in this, in areas like highly dense urban areas and nature reserves, what needs to be quiet. So, they pick up this noise by looking, by attaching microphones on the top of buildings and seeing where this noise comes from. Normally, this is not done with aircrafts because aircrafts produce a very turbulent, chaotic noise that is very hard to filter out using computers. But when we looked at what that design would look like, very flush, when we incorporated only plasma actuators and no moving control surface into our design, we saw that we might be able to develop a commercial product to fulfill this mission. So that's what we set out to do, and that's what we designed an aircraft to do. So of course, an aircraft is most silent when it is gliding and its propeller is turned off. So we took a lot of inspirations from existing glider aircraft and made it with a very high aspect ratio of about 12. As you can see, the wingspan is 3 meters. We could make it higher, so the aspect ratio would be even higher. But if it's above 3 meters, you would fall under a different class. And with that class comes more regulations like certification and inspection by the government, and we kind of didn't want to deal with that, so we set our own requirements to 3 meters. Another design that we incorporated that improves the aerodynamic efficiency and hopefully the noise it produces is a massively foldable propeller. Basically, when we turn off the motor and go gliding, the wind pushes the propeller back, giving it a more aerodynamically efficient shape and hopefully reducing the noise. Now that we see our design, let's see at the mission profile we created. So the green area here is the area that we want to noise map. We start by entering the area at an altitude of 120 meters, at which we turn off our propeller and glide back down over the course of a kilometer to 55 meters altitude. At this point, we turn back on the propeller and glide back up to 120 meters, only to repeat the process again to the other side. So we repeat this after the entire area is covered and we fulfill our mission. So we talked a lot about noise, and we also wanted to make sure that our aircraft does not produce a lot of noise at ground level. So we did an acoustic analysis and found that at the lowest flight level of 55 meters, at ground level our airplane would only produce a sound that's 22 decibels. This is much like leaves rustling in the wind, and is thus very silent. So, like I said before, part of our mission is to monitor nature reserves. And to monitor nature, you also need to preserve it, of course. So we took this into account when designing and made our aircraft as sustainable as possible. We did this by making it 89% recyclable, but also looking into the places where our materials come from. So we really wanted to have locally manufactured and producible materials. So that's why we made our structural system out of aluminium, which can be found in Eastern Europe, specifically the Alpen, and poplar, which is a tree native to Central and Eastern Europe. There is a small part that couldn't be acquired in Europe. This is balsa wood. You might know it from lightweight aircraft. You can find this in both Ecuador and in northwestern Africa. Another way we incorporated sustainability is, of course, we made our plane electric and not using any sort of prototype. And we made our plane modular. So modularity, of course, comes with a trade-off that you increase your weight and increase your points of failure, but it comes with the advantage of producing less waste. As you can see, we divided our system up into the fuselage, 2 wings, 2 booms, and an empennage that can be bolted back together. So in case we break our left wing beyond repair, we just have to replace the left wing instead of the entire aircraft, which tremendously will reduce the waste that we produce in the end. So in this entire 10 weeks, we did a lot of designing for structures, aerodynamics, propulsion, and the electrical system. But in this presentation, we really wanted to focus on the innovative parts of our design and the future-proof parts. So continuing with that topic, I want to hand the mic over to Simon, who is going to talk about the integration of plasma into our actual system.
Yes, thank you. So, maybe let's talk a bit about plasma in general. And Oliver has talked a bit more about our mission as well as the design of our drone. So what I would like to do is to go a bit more into the integration of the plasma into our system and how we really take advantage of plasma. So if you look at the plane here on the right-hand side, you can see the plasma actuators indicated with the little dotted lines here of ailerons, the elevator, and the rudder. So on our control surfaces. The control surfaces have generally been sized based on maneuverability requirements, which can also be seen here. So we have fairly low maneuverability requirements. This is due to the fact that our mission is actually mainly gliding with a few turning climbs in between. But since it's very low maneuverability requirements, this is very nice for the plasma actuators since they have a comparatively low control authority. Now, furthermore, these control surfaces feature symmetric airfoil, the NACA 642015, as can be seen here. However, we did have to make some modifications in order to integrate our plasma actuators around the trailing edge. So what we did is round out the trailing edge at a radius of 3.5% of the chord length, and that is to integrate these plasma actuators. So they overall, they're still very similar to what we showed you before. However, now we have 3 electrodes instead of 2. But the principle stays the same. There's still a dielectric battery and dielectric barrier in between, as can be seen. And it just gives us the advantage that we can now actuate in both directions. Now, if we actuate it upwards, what happens is that we create a lift force downwards, which eventually will lead to a pitch up moment, if this, for example, were the elevator. In a similar manner, we can also actuate the plasma downwards, which creates an upwards lift force and thereby a pitch downwards moment if this is the elevator, for example. So far so good, but how does this actually work? Now, if you look at this picture, you see our airfoil in a 0-degree angle of attack flow with the stagnation point here at the trailing edge, exactly at the trailing edge. Now, what happens if we actually actuate the plasma is that we induce a velocity around the trailing edge, causing the stagnation point to slightly shift towards the pressure side of the airfoil. This means that we're effectively increasing the camber of the airfoil, and therefore the circulation, and thus the lift. Now, if you compare a plasma actuator to a normal mechanical actuator, there's actually a bit of a complication because there's more control variables in comparison to the usual mechanical one, which simply has the deflection. For the plasma actuator, there's overall 4 parameters. The peak-to-peak voltage, which we decided to fix at 12 kilovolts, due to the fact that we're limited by the high voltage power system that we can actually make flight. And we also fixed the carrier frequency at 20 kilohertz. This is as we have a low noise emission, and 20 kilohertz is exactly on the upper bound of what humans can hear. So even the 22 decibels on the mentioned will barely be able to, basically not even be able to hear it. That leaves us with 2 variables that we can actually use for control, being the burst frequency, which describes the cycle of having the plasma turn on and off, and the duty cycle, which is essentially the fraction of the time it's turned on versus the period of the entire burst frequency. Now, it's nice that we have our control variables, but we can't really, we need to know how they actually affect the flow around. And as we all know, or as at least the aerospace people here know, the flow is generally dictated by the major-Stokes equations on the left-hand side. Meanwhile, plasma, being an electrical phenomenon, is completely dictated by the Maxwell equations on the right-hand side. This provides us with a bit of a problem because combining these two is extremely hard and basically impossible. So what we did instead was computational fluid dynamics. We decided to use ANSYS for this, ANSYS fluids, and since there's also not exactly a plasma bubble in ANSYS, what we decided to do is model it as a moving wall boundary condition. This also induces the velocity in a similar manner that plasma actuators would. And we were actually able to see some sort of effect. Very tiny, but it was there. However, no significant delta scale was observed overall over the entire airfoil, so we had to resort to different measures. Knowing that these actuators do work experimentally, because there was other research on this already, we decided to go to the wind tunnel test and actually try it out ourselves. So we went to the end tunnel facilities in the QDAL and used this 3D printed wing. Here, as you can see, we've integrated the plasma actuator at the trailing edge as well, to actually see how changes in our control variables will change the lift and the other aerodynamic forces around it. And the results were actually very good. So we expressed them as delta CL, so a change in the lift coefficient due to us actuating the plasma. Now, the blue line here is the plasma off case, so that's the reference case, and all the other lines are different variations of our control variables, so duty cycle and burst frequency. Overall, you can see that we achieved a delta CL of nearly 0.1, which is actually extremely good for an electrical actuator, and is even in the order of magnitude of simple mechanical actuators such as the flap, for example. So all of these lines do produce some sort of delta CL, but we ended up using duty cycle for our control to achieve the control authority that we need, and we were actually able to confirm that we are able to fulfill our requirements, our maneuverability requirements. However, in the future, since this was quite a low range of angle of attack, we do need to make more experiments and test out what happens if we increase the range of alpha, as well as using different actuators and more actuators in different locations. And that actually really brings me to the end of this presentation. I'd like everyone here to leave with two main takeaways. First of all, plasma actuation is possible. It is a viable option for the future that would really have a big impact, decrease the weight, and make things more maintainable in the future. However, there is more research needed in this topic in the future as well, in order to make it part of general aviation. Now, with that said, before we move on to questions, I would like to invite the rest of my group to join me here on stage. And I would ask all of you to give a big applause for the work they've done over the last 10 years.
Okay, who comes up with the first question? Here.
First of all, many thanks for this brilliant presentation. Very impressive. I have understood everything, so which is I'm not an error. So my question would be, have you considered as well the contamination aspect?
So the question is whether we have considered, thank you for the question, first of all. The question is whether we have considered what kind of effects the plasma actuators would have on the environment. Maybe you take that? Okay.
There's a second one here.
Okay. Yes, so actually plasma does actually produce some emissions in the sense that it does produce ozone.
Sorry, this wasn't my question.
Oh.
So you are dealing with high quality surfaces.
Okay.
So these surfaces can be easily contaminated by mosquitoes, whatever you think of. How does this maybe affect the efficiency of plasma filtration?
Yeah, so the question is what basically what the environment, including mosquitoes, what kind of impact that will have on the plasma. Maybe I can actually quickly give an answer. So generally the environment is a hazard to plasma, not just mosquitoes, but also quite a range of other things, such as rain, also do prove problematic in general. That would probably be an issue, essentially. But we think that in the future there's ways to go past this. So the question is regarding, thanks for your question. The question is regarding the verification and validation process of our design. Maybe Archie, would you like to answer that?
Thank you for your question. Hello. Yeah, thank you for your question. Regarding verification validation, so what we did was we basically, that's why we performed the wind tunnel testing, because our CFD models didn't give us accurate results, or not the results that we were expecting, which is why we spent one whole day in the wind tunnel actually building the model and making the plasma actuator, testing it out at different angles of attack to get models that were similar to literature, and we compared that to literature to validate it.
So that's your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very glad to see that if it doesn't work mathematically, that you go to an experiment. I like that personally. The question is, I know the assignment is about ionic movement, but you can compare it somehow to morphine. Morphine failure.
So the question is how it would, if we did compare the new actuation method that we investigated to other novel or other concepts, other unusual concepts. Janus, do you agree?
The answer is no. We haven't. But I can already tell you that such an approach of morphing is very complex in terms of structural integrity but also price. What we want to provide with this concept is something very easy to apply and easy to use solution essentially. Whereas morphing means, I mean, the complexity that you introduce to the system is of a different dimension. Yeah, that's answer.
Okay. Hope that answers your question. In addition to that, maybe the maintainability in general is quite a big advantage of this.
So, have you looked at any new or different failure mode, and in terms of the failure rate, how does it compare with conventional actuators?
Okay, so the question is regarding the failure rate that get added due to plasma. Maybe Daniels would like to answer that.
So indeed, plasma actuators bring mainly two new failure modes to the actuators themselves. Those are the corrosion of the electrodes and the breakdown of the electric barrier. For the electric barrier, the carbon tips used here are very sensitive to the ozone generated by the plasma actuators. However, in our design, we use a polycarbonate backplane, which is much more resistant to that. And from conversations with our tutor and experts in the field, it was concluded that the electric barrier failure is not really applicable to our design, it's very durable, and that leaves only the corrosion of the electrodes themselves. And that's the reason we chose copper, that is documented to be the most resistant to corrosion in this application, and the values were mentioned that the durability exceeds 10 hours of constant actuation at 100% duty cycle. That would mean around, let's say, 20 hours of flight, which is still lower than most other mechanical components. And in our design, at some point, we considered to have the shelling edges interchangeable, so have them separate from the rest of the structure to be removable and then replaceable. However, that was deemed outside the scope of this exercise to implement and left as recommendations. Does that answer your question?
What's the power consumption of this system with respect to a conventional control surface?
Thank you for your question. So the question is how the power consumption of plasma actuators are in comparison to a normal actuator. Maybe Anton would like to talk about that.
So the power consumption of the total plasma actuation system is around or probably below 30 watts, which is slightly higher, around 1.5 times classic servo actuators, but it's still nowhere. It is pretty insignificant compared to the power consumption of propulsion, and it doesn't really affect the design in any significant way.
are we from real life applying this technology, or maybe in this very specific aircraft in a real application?
Yeah, so the question is basically regarding the technology readiness of this technology. Maybe I can quickly answer that. So, as of now, they're used in wind tunnels. There are very few experimental planes that do fly with plasma actuators. So that it is a possibility. There was a PhD thesis in Darmstadt a couple of years back where they actually were able to fly an actual aircraft. However, they did not use it for control. So they mainly used it for separation control, as in the video that we showed earlier. To get this really going into aviation industry, it's going to take quite a lot of more research into it, to be honest. But the important thing is that we are able to see some sort of actuation, and that's the takeaway, I would say, is that maybe it's a long way, but I think it's a good way.
Theory works.
Exactly, the theory works, which is already a good sign.
I can add to that, maybe also there is a US research project that also incorporates an entirely plasma actuated aircraft, but it's in the
Any more questions? Additional one? Sure. If I have understood correctly, you were focusing on metallic body. Have you looked as well into other materials, alternatives like thermoplast and this kind of thing, because weight is an issue, recyclability is an issue, which is okay for aluminum, but is there a limit to use this technology with regard to aluminum, or what about alternatives?
Yes, thank you for the question. So the question is whether the plasma actuation will essentially affect the material choice. I think Honor is maybe able to answer that question.
Yes. So first off, the main body is made out of the poplar wood, and only the structural elements are made out of aluminum. So just to clear that up. And the other aspect is there is also a dielectric barrier, so the insulator is also between the main body and the actual actuator, if I'm correct, like that was? Yes. So all in all, the actuators don't affect the main body at all because it's insulated. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you. Any further questions?
Question? I'm not going to conclude the session, so thank you very much.